Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Davey Deathray here with a brand new video, and this is the channel's very first franchise ranking, so I'm really excited to see what you guys think, and gosh, I just might get completely eviscerated in the comments. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Friday the 13th franchise, which holds a really special place in my heart, but really quick before we get to the ranking, I want to give a quick shout out here. So you guys may have found me from the Slaughtered Lamb movie podcast. You know, I know there's a lot of mutual subs here between the two of us. Darren and Frank are just incredibly nice, sweet guys. I've been watching them for a couple years now, and they were one of the inspirations that really made me want to get going and start my very own channel. So, you know, I was fortunate enough to spend some time with them at H45 last fall, and these guys have been so nice to the channel, so supportive. In fact, last weekend they put their live show on pause to shout out the channel, give us some praise for what we're doing here, and it's just something that you never expect to hear. It completely energized me for the rest of the weekend. I was really busy, you know, putting stuff together for the channel. I was kind of running on fumes, and that just propelled me and gave me so much energy moving forward. So thank you guys so much, not only for the content that you provide, but also the sense of community that you bring here to the YouTube family. It doesn't go unnoticed, and it's so damn encouraging. I'm dedicating this video to the Slaughtered Lamb movie podcast. And Frank, this shirt's for you, bud. And of course, before we get going, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know your ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise, and tell me where I'm wrong. All right, guys, it's a little bit of story time here. So I first discovered this franchise as a little kid. You know, it's Friday the 13th weekend. You put on the USA Network. This was like the early 90s, and so you see edited versions of most of these films. Now, they didn't play every single one, and they certainly didn't play them in order, so I legit watched the very first Friday the 13th thinking Jason was the killer. I had no idea that there was ever another killer because that hockey mask and his character are so closely tied to that name that it didn't even occur to me. So as I got older and fell more and more in love with horror, I would revisit those movies, you know, sleepovers with friends, all that kind of good stuff. And then fast forward to when I first met my wife. Our very first date was on a Friday the 13th. It was actually the day before Valentine's Day. And after dinner and drinks, we went back to her place and we put on Jason Lives. That was her very first experience with the franchise, and really, really special. Now, fast forward about 8 more years, and I had asked Kate to marry me. So when we're putting together our wedding plans, we figured it's only fitting, since our first date was on a Friday the 13th, that we should also get married on one. So yeah, we got hitched on May 13th, 2022. So even though I'm a Halloween guy through and through, and Michael Myers is my boy, you know, Friday the 13th is a franchise to me that's just a little more digestible sometimes. If I'm walking around the house doing chores, or I just want to put something on for fun, I'm way more likely to dip into Friday the 13th than any other horror franchise. For this particular ranking, we're going to stick to the studio released films for consistency and ease. Now, you guys know how I feel about fan films, right? I mean, if you've checked out some of the other vids on the channel, you know I'm a huge fan of the Never Hike Alone series, as well as other horror fan films. I just think they're getting better and better, and I love the way they connect to us as fans. So yeah, maybe in the future I'll rank those fan films. Let me know in the comments if that's something you want to see. All right, let's get things started with number 12 on the list. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, it's no secret by this time that things were getting a little bit tired with the franchise, and the censors were really having their way, especially with the kills. I feel like a few of these movies are almost cut for TV other than a couple nudie moments. But I know that this film has also carved out a little section of fans that really love it, and maybe it's that awesome wet look to Jason, or just the fact that it's kind of silly and a little cheesy, so you can lean into that and have a really good time. I do think there are some memorable characters here, and certainly a few memorable deaths. But in the end, I just find myself revisiting this one not very often, and I don't have very much fun with it at all. I mean, that end, dear God. Coming up next in the number 11 slot is Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I can kind of see where they're going with this one, and I do appreciate when films in a franchise try something new, but this one just goes so far off the rails as far as bringing in items from the Evil Dead series, which, you know, I have a lot of love for those movies, but I'm not quite sure that that belongs in a Friday the 13th film. Also, I think the look of Jason is way off, the whole like belt and everything. Kane Hodder finally looks his height. He just doesn't look very imposing, and he's not really in the movie as Jason very much. So, you know, while I applaud them for trying something new here, I don't have much fun with this film other than as a curiosity. And man, that synth score is so distracting. It's really off-putting, especially during the credits. It feels like it's never gonna end and like it's a joke on the audience. But this one gets ranked above Jason Takes Manhattan because I do like some of the kills here. And I got to admit it, Creighton Duke and Steven as characters, I just like seeing them in this movie. I think they're a lot of fun, and they also bring some levity into a movie that really doesn't have much going on in the way of positives. And we are cracking into the top 10 with our number 10 spot, Jason X. This one beats Jason Goes to Hell by just a smidge, and I'm guessing y'all know what that's because of, right? It's the liquid nitrogen kill! Yes, everyone loves that kill, of course, but man, this movie looks like some television show as far as the production value goes. I swear, sometimes it's like you're watching an episode of Star Trek Next Generation. So even though Jason may have some cool kills and a couple scenes where he really goes completely apeshit, I just don't really like the characters here very much. I don't like the weird sexy vibe, that odd futuristic kind of thing that they're going for. And yeah, Uber Jason kinda looks cool for a few seconds, but every time I go back to this one, I just get increasingly bored. However, it does get a few bonus points for having David Cronenberg cameo as one of the government scientists in the opening scene. And coming in at number 9 is Freddy vs. Jason. This was the first Jason movie I ever saw in the theater, and while I had a lot of fun with it back in '03, it just hasn't aged very well at all. I think the overall look of the film, the effects, some of the acting decisions and casting choices here just don't really sit right with me. I know they wanted to have a big difference between Jason and Freddy as far as height goes, but I think Ken Kurtzinger is just a little too big for Jason. I know, unpopular opinion, I get it. And also the soundtrack here just really dates the film. It just, you know, when you go back and watch it, it really is a time capsule that brings you right back to '03, and I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing here. Gotta give it up for that rave scene though. It is pretty awesome to see Jason completely covered in flames walking through the fields, you know, cracking open a keg just to put the fire out. There is some humor here that works, and Jason gets a bunch of great kills, so that's why it's ranked here in the top 10. Coming in at number 8 is the Heartbreaker of the franchise, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Now I call this one the Heartbreaker of the franchise because the censors just completely gutted all of the fun out of this one. You know, they finally hired a special effects artist to be a director here in John Carl Buechler, and every bit of carnage candy is stripped right out, and this one, other than some nudity, it's like you're watching a movie that's been edited for television. It does get some points for how awesome Jason looks. When I was growing up seeing this stuff on TV, I loved how you see his spine. I love the way that his face looks once Tina breaks the mask off. So that really brought me there as a kid, and that's why it's not ranked lower on the list here. But unfortunately, the performances are kind of stilted as well. This one's right in that odd spot of the 80s where the fashion and hair is just completely dreadful, so it kind of sticks out as a sore thumb within the franchise, and the lack of gore just doesn't get it any higher on my list. Number 7 on the menu are those damn enchiladas, and Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. This one came at the beginning of that era where the MPAA was editing out a lot of the gore. I mean, we see some in the aftermath, but a lot of the kills have quick cutaways and don't really show that much. But I love the trashy characters here. Ethel and Junior are just so much fun. I feel like I get so much joy out of those characters. I love Demon, I love Reggie the Reckless, and you know, throwing us a little curveball with Roy as the killer. Spoiler alert, really works for me in the end. And even though some people might consider it a cop-out and that it's relatively obvious that Roy is the killer because the camera really lingers on him, I just like that they were trying something different here. Unfortunately, Tommy is completely sidelined. He has less dialogue than Mad Max in Fury Road, it seems, and I wanted a little more personality from that character. I understand he's going through some very serious trauma, and that's all part of it, but since he's the main focal point and kind of our final guy, we just don't get much from him, and I really wanted that here. And our last entry before cracking into the top 5, number 6 is Friday the 13th from 2009. What can I say? I am a sucker for this movie. I saw it in the theater and it just gripped me right away. That opening scene is pretty epic. You kind of get like a little mini movie within the first 15 minutes or so. I really love the portrayal of Jason here by Derek Mears. I think it's something that's totally different from what we've seen in the whole franchise as far as getting to know his personality a bit more. I always liken him to like a spider in this film, you know? Camp Crystal Lake is his web. If you come into that territory, it's gonna ring a little bell and he's gonna pop out of his trap door and grab you. You know, it's like the last place where he felt safe with his mother and he's gonna protect it by all means. And yeah, the characters here are kind of throwaway and half of them are really annoying. But man, watch these movies and tell me that this entire franchise isn't filled with characters that are annoying and completely throwaway. I like how they go back to camping activities for Jason's implements of destruction, and even though I know this one is divisive, I have a really fun time watching it. You know, Marcus Nispel brings this intensity and brutality to his films. I thought he did a great job with 03's Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, and he brings that over to Friday the 13th. So, you know, originally this was actually higher in my ranking before I took another look at everything and reconsidered all the films together. So, yeah, that's me, Davey Deathray, lover of Friday the 13th, 2009. It is top 5 time, and to kick off the home stretch, we have the original Friday the 13th from 1980. I mean, really, what can you say about this one that hasn't been said before? We all know that Sean S. Cunningham was inspired by Halloween and even calls this film a ripoff, but I do think they brought in some European influences. You know, they definitely made it bloodier, grimier, sexier. They kind of ramped everything up a notch, and this film, I think you could say, is responsible for that whole slasher boom we saw in the 80s. For me, it ranks right here because even though Jason isn't the antagonist, I do think this film kind of sets up everything that we can come to expect from the franchise moving forward. You know, other than really the whodunit element, although I guess that is in part 5 as well. And gosh, can you even call this one a whodunit? Because we don't even see Pamela until the end of the movie. But the kills are great. Tom Savini's effects are awesome. The music by Harry Manfredini just brings you right in. Very reminiscent of like the music from Psycho. So it's really classic, but coming, you know, a couple decades down the line from that film. So I think it really brings in some elements that make it right at home as a godfather in the slasher subgenre. Up next at number 4 in our ranking is Friday the 13th Part 3, 3D. This one I kind of went back and forth on. I didn't know if it really belonged in the top 5 or just outside of it, but recently I rewatched a bunch of these films, and I do think that it does belong there. The big reason why is Richard Brooker as Jason is just a friggin' beast. He looks awesome with that no-neck, giant-shouldered, like a tight end or fullback in football. You know, he's the first one to don the mask, so that's really great as well. And I do think the characters here are really fun. You know, I like getting to know them, even the ones that, you know, some people say are more annoying, like Shelly. I actually really like Shelly as a character in the film because he keeps things moving along. We've also got some classic, like, 80s movie stereotype characters, like the bikers that are just there, the Cheech and Chong replacement. So, you know, those are really fun, and really when it comes to negatives here, I think it's no secret that the 3D effects haven't aged that well, and they seem really like hyper focused on in the film, just for the sake of having them there as a gimmick. And also, you know, I know this is another unpopular opinion, but I just don't think the performance is quite there for Chris. I do like how she fights for herself in the final act. I think that's awesome. I just wish the performance were a bit stronger. It's just something that leaves a little bit to be desired for me. Ladies and gentlemen, we've officially entered nitty-gritty territory. Number 3 on our ranking is Friday the 13th Part 2. I almost feel like with these top 3 that they're kind of interchangeable depending on how I'm feeling and just what kind of mood I'm in, but man, Part 2, it does everything that Part 1 does and does it better. I think Ginny as a final girl is one of the best we ever get. She's smart, she is resourceful, she puts up a really good fight with Jason and is pretty quick-witted when it comes to kicking Paul's ass at chess. Of course, we get our first look at Jason as an adult. He's got the sackhead look. It's really iconic, very disturbing, you know, completely taken from The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which I think is an awesome homage and really kind of puts you right there, makes it feel real. The music from Harry Manfredini is back and better than ever, I think, in this one. It really creates that mood. You know, when Ginny is running away from Jason and she goes into his little shack at the end and you see him like running through the window, I don't know what it is about that, but it just puts me right in the moment. And yeah, Friday the 13th Part 2 is awesome and easily a top 3 pick. And let us take a moment to remember Crazy Ralph. At this point, you're probably wondering which one of the fan favorites is going to be his runner-up. This is a tough one because this movie used to be my favorite in the franchise, and then, you know, over the last like decade or so, my feelings shifted. So number 2 is Friday the 13th, the final chapter. I absolutely adore this film. You know, to me, in a lot of ways, it is the quintessential slasher. Ted White as Jason just brings this grit to the role. You can hear him grunting. Jason feels like a real person and he's very imposing. Of course, you have Tom Savini coming back to do the special effects, so every single kill here is memorable. It looks great. I love the magic trick kind of approach that Savini takes. And we have awesome performances from people like Corey Feldman and Judy Aronson, who is one of my favorite slasher girls of all time. And of course, you can't talk about the final chapter without mentioning Crispin Glover and his killer dance moves. And you also have the Doublemint twins here too, so that's pretty cool. Now that we've covered our runner-up, it's time to give Teddy Bear a kiss, you dead fuck, and move on to number 1. And by using the process of elimination, y'all know where we're at. Number 1 is Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. This movie has it all. Even though the final chapter may be the quintessential slasher, I think there's something about Jason Lives where it is the quintessential 80s film. It's got that energy to it, the Alice Cooper rock soundtrack. Tom Matthews as Tommy Jarvis is just so charming. I love Megan as a final girl. I think her and Tommy together, it's just one of the best 1-2 punches in the whole subgenre. Really love CJ Graham as Jason as well here, and the meta sense of humor that they just sprinkle in throughout the film. It just brings it this different feeling from all of the other Friday the 13th films and makes it a total standout for me. And yeah, maybe I'm a little biased because it was the movie I watched with my wife on our first date and there's some nostalgia tied to it. But man, I thought about this a lot, and this film to me in every single way is just totally superior. It is the best, the most definitive Friday the 13th film in my opinion. And yeah, that's it. That's my ranking. Thank you guys so much for coming by. I hope you really enjoyed this video, and you know, even if we don't have the same exact ranking, which I'd be pretty surprised if somebody had the same ranking that I have, let me know in the comments below, how do you rank the Friday the 13th franchise? And is this something you want to see more of on the channel? If so, let me know which series you want me to cover next and I'll line something up. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. And until next time, I've been and will continue to be Davey Deathray. Take care.